Hey guys, Ron here. I anticipate I'll be running into people here because I'm at the marina at night. It's a beautiful night. And here's one right as I start out. And, in the winter, it's completely dead. It's very quiet here, very nice. The weather gets warmer. We got a lot of tourists here. A lot of people come in, and it's a lot of people around. And I like my privacy when I'm doing my videos, even though I'm out in public. So anyway, tonight I'm going to do a video of now, let me say this first, and more people coming. So let me say that, full disclosure, I have done, if you look back through my videos, I've done a video before on Dorothy Stratton. I'm going to pause. Like I say, it's the time of year. If this were 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night in the winter, there wouldn't be a soul here. Anyway, I've done a video on Dorothy Stratton before. Dorothy Stratton, I was out in front of her at the home on Clarkson in West LA, where Dorothy Stratton, Playboy Playmate, and Playmate of the Year, 1980 or 79, I don't know, but she was Playmate of the Year. I think it was 1980. Dorothy Stratton, and actress, was starting to get roles in TV and movies. I've done a video in front of her house about a year ago and talked to you about her life and her death in that house. Her husband, her estranged husband, Paul Snider, killed her and then committed suicide. And gruesome. First he strapped her to a S&M type bench that he had built out of a weight bench, and he strapped her to it and he had sex with her, and then he killed her, and then he killed himself. Hold again. Now, I'll say it again. If it was November, there'd be nobody here. But that time will come again. God, I'm getting so antisocial. It's terrible. Anyway, so I've done the video at the Clarkson house where the murder-suicide took place. And I talked about Dorothy Stratton and Paul Snider. But tonight I want to talk a little bit I want to expound on that. And really, I think I've got more insight into the case in the last year, and Dorothy's life and Paul's life. It's interesting because I was watching a podcast and somebody correctly pointed out really that the film Star 80, which is a very overlooked film, it starred Mariel Hemingway as Dorothy Stratton and Eric Roberts in an incredible performance as, turn around for a second, Roberts as Paul Snider. That really the film is really kind of told from Snyder's point of view in a lot of ways, and he's sort of the dark star of the film in a lot of ways. I think I'm just going to have to get used to the fact there's going to be people passing me like every 2 minutes. So that's the way it is. Oh, I thought she was wearing a bikini and I wanted to show you. It's just pain. And here comes somebody else. So this is just the way it's going to be. I'm just going to have to roll with it. Good thing it's not a weekend night, or it'd really be crowded. So anyway, I think what I want to talk to you about tonight a little bit is, and with these beautiful boat views, is the hold that I believe that Snider still had on Dorothy Stratton. I was talking about the film Star 80, and it was a good film. It was a very good film. Bob Fosse directed it, and I think Fosse was intrigued with the Snider character. It's easy to say Paul Snider was evil and sick, and I mean, he was. He murdered Dorothy, and he murdered himself, and he killed himself. But no one is one-dimensional. Everyone has vulnerabilities and weaknesses, and maybe some good in them. I don't know how much Snider had. He was a pimp, presumably in Canada, back in Vancouver, and a lot of other unsavory things, and kind of a sleazy guy in general who wanted to be somebody. But they recognized, hold again, I think people recognized that Snider must have had some, like most sociopaths, if he was a sociopath. I don't know that he was a sociopath, but like so many people that end up like this, that he must have had some kind of charm and appeal. And that's kind of what I want to focus on in this video. From the further research I've done, is that Dorothy Stratton was given advice many times, well, I don't know, but many times, but several times, to not go see Snyder in person anymore. And if she insisted on giving him money as part of a settlement, which they didn't want her to do either, she resisted all efforts. She was very contradictory in her statements, and I'll tell you why. First, I'll tell you a little bit about them, and then who the characters are, the players, and then we'll talk about that last couple of days and that last night and what happened. So Dorothy Stratton is 18 years old. She's working at a Dairy Queen in Vancouver, BC. Her mother is a single mother. Dorothy has a brother and a younger sister, and the father had essentially abandoned them, so it was a tough life. They didn't have a lot of money. Dorothy's mother, their real name was Hook Stratton, and Dorothy's mother was from Holland, I believe, and was still trying to fit into Canadian society. Dorothy didn't have the accent, but her mother did. Dorothy was Canadian, but her mother was still trying to find her way. And Dorothy, ever industrious, worked all 4 years during high school at a Dairy Queen for part-time. And during those years, she never considered herself beautiful. She considered her awkward. She was bullied at times. She certainly wasn't, a beauty queen, although as she got a little older, 17 and 18, boys started paying attention to her. But that was really the first time. Now, she had a high school boyfriend, and that didn't end well at all when it ended. And I believe that Paul Snyder was really her second major relationship and final relationship, I believe. And, when people talk about Dorothy Stratton, Peter Bogdanovich, the late director, who had a relationship with Dorothy at the very end of her life, which is part of the reason, unfortunately, indirectly, that she was killed. Hugh Hefner, people who work for Playboy, everybody describes Dorothy as just saintly. And obviously nobody is a saint. But Dorothy was so sweet that I wouldn't use the word trusting when it came to Paul Snyder. But there was something going on there, and I'll get back to that in a second. So, at the boat. So Dorothy's working at the Dairy Queen in Vancouver. Snyder walks in. He's got another woman with him. I believe she's dressed in a mink. And Snyder was a lot of flash. He was 26. Dorothy was 18. Paul Snyder was Jewish. So very different in a lot of ways from Dorothy. And he was very street smart and had dealt with unsavory characters in Vancouver. And one of his dreams was what he saw in front of him, a young girl that he could get into Playboy magazine, maybe the movies, and they'd live happily ever after in their Bel Air mansion. And that's exactly what Snyder did. He started dating Dorothy. He took some pictures of her. Now in the Star 80 the Star 80 movie, the actress who plays Dorothy's mother, Nellie, in a tearful scene says, "I never signed the papers allowing Dorothy to have those photographs sent to Playboy," the nude photographs that Snyder took or had taken by a photographer. He must have forged them. But all the research I've done shows that Nellie did sign the paperwork. Now, Dorothy had to persuade her mother to sign it, but she did. And then Dorothy was allowed to come out in 1978 and meet with Playboy and take photographs there. And everything happened very, very quickly. Dorothy was embraced at the, literally and figuratively, at the Playboy mansion. If we listen to if we read Peter Bogdanovich's account, Peter Bogdanovich, the late director, great success in his early years as directing, then terrible failures, 2 bankruptcies, and never had a really, well, I don't know the last 20 years of his life, I shouldn't say that, but his personal relationships were in chaos too. Peter Bogdanovich says that when Dorothy was at the Playboy mansion, that Hugh Hefner did probably what I assume he did with every playmate, that he hit on her in the grotto, the jacuzzi, the big grotto, sort of long lake jacuzzi and pool area at the Playboy Mansion. Hefner later said he did take a nude jacuzzi with her. He said he didn't force anything on her or hit on her. I think he said he might have suggested. I think he said he was interested in her, but then she said she was engaged to Paul Snider and he backed off. Now, we don't know if any of this is true, although Bogdanovich says that first in his manuscript, apparently he said that he used the word rape concerning Hefner, and then he changed it to seduce. They didn't want to get sued. But let's back up. So Dorothy comes out, and okay, let's say Hefner is after her, probably other men at the Playboy Mansion. Paul Snider, her boyfriend, comes out and starts controlling every aspect of her career, and encourages her to sleep with actors and directors and producers if they can further her career, which Dorothy acts insulted about. Dorothy was very different than a lot of the playmates. She was not, by all accounts, she was not a wild girl, and probably not into drugs or drinking. She was a Canadian, kind of small town, even though it was Vancouver. She was kind of a wholesome girl who wasn't into that party lifestyle, by all accounts. I don't know what happened over the next 2 years, and I don't know what happened when she was with Bogdanovich, the director, for the few months they were together. I mean, he admits being a cocaine user at times in his life and his career. Whether he gave any to her, who knows? We can all speculate, probably. But the point is that Dorothy was being hit on by men and women at the Playboy Mansion. And Snider was controlling all aspects of her career, like I said. She got some film roles, small film roles. She did a Buck Rogers episode, which I remember seeing when I was a kid. She did a Fantasy Island. She did a movie called Galaxina. She had a walk-on scene in another terrible movie that I actually went to see called Americathon. So she was getting roles throughout 78 and into 1980. And her desire apparently was to, do her bit with Playboy, but use that as a stepping stone to become an actress. And I believe that. And she was getting work. And in fact, towards the end of her life, in the last couple months, I believe it was June or July, and she was killed in August. She was, maybe it was earlier, maybe it was spring, because she came back to the Playboy Mansion to participate in an award show for Playboy for Playmate of the Year, and she went on the Tonight Show, which was Johnny Carson then, and she told about her desire to be an actress and how excited she was that she was starting to get film roles. So we have Dorothy Stratton, who's Playmate of the Year, and quickly becoming an actress who's getting work and becoming well-known more well-known in the industry, but she's still being controlled by Paul Snider, who had a lot of derogatory terms used about him, including the Jewish pimp back in Canada. So the more Snider tries to hold on and control her, the more she starts slipping away from him. And it culminates where she is cast in a film by Peter Bogdanovich called They All Laughed, something he also wrote. Now, Peter Bogdanovich was sort of a wonderkind. He started out to be a writer. He went to Stella Adler. Actually, started to be an actor. Went to Stella Adler in New York. And then he became a writer. He met Orson Welles. He met Roger Corman, did some work for him. And a very smart young guy. And when he was 30 years old, I believe it was 1970 or 71, he directed this huge film called Last Picture Show with Jeff Bridges and Sybil Shepherd. And he was a huge hit, a lot of Oscars. And Sybil Shepherd became a star, and it certainly didn't hurt Jeff Bridges' career, young guy. And Bogdanovich was, the up-and-coming new huge director at that point. And then he made a couple of other films. What's Up, Doc? The following year. Barbra Streisand, I believe. Is that with Ryan O'Neal? It's definitely Barbra Streisand. And then he made Paper Moon. He had 3 big hit films in a row. Paper Moon, I think that's the one where Tatum O'Neal, Ryan O'Neal's daughter, and they were both in the film, won Best Actress at 10 years old. youngest ever, I believe, to win Best Actress award. So Peter Bogdanovich is in a role, but by the time he meets, and then Bogdanovich has an affair with Sybil Shepherd, and ends up ending his marriage with Polly Platt, also an actress, and really helped him in his career a lot, kind of career sort of pseudo manager. And then has this long romantic relationship with Sybil Shepherd. Well, that ended as his career went down and down and down throughout the 70s. After these 3 mega hits, his career with Sybil Shepherd ends. And she had trouble getting work after that. I think she probably had a good degree of trouble for the next 10 years or so until she got Moonlighting, the TV show. But I digress. So Bogdanovich was close with Hefner and liked to frequent the Playboy Mansion. I guess we can probably imagine why, right? And he finds out about Dorothy Stratton, and she gets the role in his film called They All Laughed. And in that film, it's interesting because the John Ritter character wears glasses and he looks like Bogdanovich. It almost seems like, and Bogdanovich later said that the characters in that film, and I have not seen it, I'll have to watch it, it didn't do very well at all. And there's a story behind They All Laugh too, but anyway, not important. But look up They All Laughed. During the making of that film in New York, Peter Bogdanovich and Dorothy Stratton start having an affair. And Dorothy knew it was the end of her marriage with Snyder, but she was reluctant to, certainly didn't tell him for a while. If anything, she told Snyder she wanted space. Snyder was no dummy. He knew something was going on. He got a private detective to follow her. And through the months that she was filming They All Laughed, primarily in New York, Dorothy was keeping her distance from Snyder and wouldn't, I believe for the first time, wouldn't allow him anywhere near the set. Said it was a closed set, which wasn't exactly true. She just didn't want Snyder to know that she was with Bogdanovich, and she was backing out of the marriage. And he was seeing private detectives and lawyers. She was seeing financial people and lawyers, and she was planning a separation and then a divorce. But she wanted to let Snyder down gently. Now, what's interesting is, for the last couple months, from say, I believe for 3 or 4 months period during the spring of 1980, she did not even see Snyder, and she kept contact at a minimum. But eventually, during the summer of 1980, she came back to LA, and she was staying in Peter Bogdanovich's home in Bel Air. Snyder was still living with his roommate, or perhaps 2 roommates, over at the Clarkson house, which I've shown you on the other video here in West LA. And basically, Snyder was going nuts, except for what they don't show you in the Star 80 film, and I don't know about the Death of a Centerfold, the TV movie with Jamie Lee Curtis. I refuse to see because she looks even less like Dorothy Stratton than Mariel Hemingway did, among other reasons. But in the film, they don't show you that. They allude to it, but Snyder, at the time by August of 80, at the time that he killed Dorothy and himself, he had a new girlfriend. And not only did he have a girlfriend, and she was only like 17, he had already moved her into the Clarkson home. And Dorothy knew about it. So here, Snyder is professing his eternal love for Dorothy and begging her not to leave him, and asking why she had closed the joint bank account, and trying to find ways, even through being wired once, that he was trying to initiate what's called an alienation of affection clause, kind of suit against Bogdanovich through an attorney, saying that that basically that Bogdanovich had taken her away from Snyder, and she was Snyder's primary source of income, which is true. But beyond that, like I said, he already had this new girl, Patty, living with him, and Dorothy knew about Patty. In fact, there was a time that Dorothy did meet with Snyder at the house, and they were cordial enough, and Patty came home at some point and met Dorothy, and they were actually by all accounts, were friendly with each other. And in fact, Dorothy went through the closet and picked out some of her clothes, or still at the Clarkson house, and then said to Patty, she could have the rest of the clothes. So apparently there was no outward animosity toward Patty by Dorothy. In fact, Dorothy told people she was hoping that Patty and Paul would get married, figuring that if Paul was happy with a new woman, he'd leave her to her own devices, let her have her new life with Bogdanovich. I think that Bogdanovich and Dorothy would have gotten married. I don't think it would have lasted. In fact, here's a twist you may not know. Dorothy's sister Louise, who was actually staying with Dorothy and Bogdanovich at Bogdanovich's Bel Air house that August when she was killed, 1980, August 14th. Louise was 13 when Dorothy was killed. Now, later on, she actually, let me count, 8 years later, she was, 21? I believe when she turned 21, she married Peter Bogdanovich, and they were married for about 12 years, till 2001. Interesting, isn't it? We don't know when it started with them. I hope it wasn't when she was 13 in their joint grieving period, mourning, but we'll never know. Anyway, I guess my point is that the meeting to talk about dividing assets and the coming separation and all that with Dorothy and Paul Snider at the house where she met Patty, that one was okay enough. But after that, Snider started making threats. In fact, apparently Louise walked in on a phone call that she was having, and I believe this was at Bogdanovich's house, that Dorothy was having with Snider, and Snider was making all kinds of threats. And Dorothy was really scared, and I think he was claiming, in fact, we know now that Snider first borrowed a gun, later retrieved by the friend who had borrowed it, who never felt comfortable giving it to him. But Snider, not being a U.S. citizen at that point, could not buy a gun, so he borrowed a handgun, and he actually stalked Bogdanovich's house for hours once in the bushes, and he was waiting for Snider and Dorothy to come out. They never came out, so he finally gave up. He went up to Mulholland. Apparently he was thinking about suicide, and then just ended up going home. Fired the gun in the air, things like that. But there was a time when Dorothy agreed to meet Snider at a restaurant in LA, and her team, her people, said, let us go with you, and we'll even sit a few tables away and watch you. And she absolutely forbid it, said it would be okay. And the last day, and you have to remember now, this is a period in which Dorothy had already been threatened by Paul via telephone, and Dorothy was apparently acting weird with Bogdanovich at a restaurant, watching the entrances. Dorothy was already frightened that Paul might do something to her or to them. Now, she never specifically told this to Bogdanovich, but he noted her almost paranoid behavior, and he put two and two together, and certainly after the fact could sense and realize that she was afraid that Snider would do something, which he eventually did. So on that last day, she went to go see Snider at the home, and people were checking in. She was told very firmly by her people, don't see Paul alone. We will go. We will hand him cash. We will hand him a check. We'll do whatever you want. But do not go see him alone. And she insisted on going to see him. And she had told her mother that from that prior meeting where she met Patty, Snider's new girlfriend, she had told her mother via telephone. She said, so, he's so sad. He was crying. I don't want to hurt him. Maybe we can even be friends. But in the same conversation, she said, when he approached me and hugged me, she said it made my skin crawl. So, you guys can speculate probably better than me. This is a very young woman, 20 years old, who felt badly. And I think there was a part of her that felt she was indebted to Snider, who started her career, which, let's face it, he did, and got her into Playboy, or got her at least the interview, got the photos and put the idea in her head. And I think that whether she cared about him still, I don't know. I really don't know. I think she was just such a big-hearted person, such a loving person. I think she just did really. I think it really disturbed her to see Paul so frightened and sad. And then there was that other part of him that would threaten her, and he was a very, very scary. Could be a very, very scary guy, and she knew that, I would imagine, in his desperation, that he was even scarier. But you would think then that she would not go see him alone, but she did go see him alone that last day. And the belief is that he took a shotgun that he had bought, I think, only a couple days prior. There used to be a newspaper in Los Angeles, a free paper. There was the Penny Saver, and then there was one called the Recycler. That was before the internet, and they would put ads to sell things in the Recycler, as well as, other things. Anyway, mostly ads to purchase things. See, constant people here, constant. And he bought a shotgun from a guy in the valley at a construction site, which they also portray in the Star 80 movie. And the thought is that during the conversation at the home there in Clarkson, and they were alone in the house, the roommate stayed away. I guess Patty was told to stay away also, Snyder's girlfriend. The belief is that he took the shotgun, ordered her to his bedroom, closed the door, and raped her and killed her, and then killed himself. I just wonder why, and I'd appreciate your comments, guys, why you think she insisted on seeing him alone when she just as easily could have met him in public like she did at the restaurant at the earlier trip, or could have brought people with her. They really were saying, don't see him alone. And Bogdanovich could have sent, Bogdanovich was a wealthy, at that time, before the two bankruptcies, but he was a wealthy director. Bogdanovich could have sent people, maybe security from the studio that he knew, maybe guys he knew who had worked on his crews, Teamster guys, tough guys. It's very easy when you're in that world and when you have that wealth and you have those connections to make sure that your girlfriend, I'm gonna hold again here for a minute since we got rush hour. It's easy to make sure your girlfriend isn't alone when she goes to her estranged, creepy husband's house. Or at least have somebody come over and check in on them in the hour. But she went alone, and she paid with her life. I think it was a combination of things. Like I said, I think that Dorothy, again, I said it a few minutes ago, but I think Dorothy felt indebted to Snyder. I think she still cared about him in some way. I think she was afraid of him. I think she just hated conflict, and I don't like conflict. A lot of people don't. I can understand that. I think she was hoping for a clean split. And I think that she was afraid too. I know it's clear that she was afraid, but did she still care about him? Did he still have some kind of a hold on her? Was it his magnetic personality? She had grown far beyond the young girl she had been, I assume, 2 years earlier at the Dairy Queen in Vancouver. But is it really that easy to walk away from a relationship that, your first love, and he was her first love? And the Peter Bogdanovich's book, Killing in the Unicorn, was not praised, quite the opposite. In fact, a lot of people said he was self-aggrandizing, portraying himself in sort of this saintly manner and like a newfound feminist, which clearly he wasn't. And he was a guy, like most guys, but he was a guy with a lot of money, a good-looking guy with a lot of money, a lot of fame, and he could have his pick of young, beautiful women. Badoom, and that's what guys do, as we know. Always has been, always will be. However, people speculate that was this, Bogdanovich goes on to say, she was my soulmate. He portrays this as the love affair, romance, soulmate, madly in love, of the century. But they had only known each other a short time, just a matter of months. So was it lust? Was it deep love? Was Peter Bogdanovich not just being cathartic with writing the book? Was he out to get Hefner? Because the book Killing in the Unicorn, Peter Bogdanovich's book that he wrote a couple of years after, well, he took a break from directing because he had 4 bombs in a row. Then he lost Dorothy. Then he wrote the book, and that ended his friendship with Hefner for sure. Hefner was furious when he read the book, and which kind of portrayed Hefner as being semi-complicit because the world of Playboy killed Dorothy or got her killed, and that he himself, Hefner, had tried to assault her. It used to be called hitting on a woman. You know, in the 21st century, it's called assaulting. Sometimes. He says nothing happened. Dorothy never said, I believe, never said outright, he forced himself on me and was terrible. I can't imagine that because I don't know. I wasn't there. And, you know, these people were hopped up on dope and drunk and all this. But with the pickings of women that Hefner had to his dying day, I find it hard to believe he'd force himself on anybody. But who knows? We never know. So in the end, Dorothy goes to see Paul Snider that last day, and he blows his brains out and he murders her. It's very interesting, and that's why I wanted to kind of speculate on this portion of it. Why did she go see him alone, especially that last day? Like I said, she could have even brought Louise, her sister. I don't think Snyder would have done anything crazy with Dorothy's 13-year-old sister there. I guess she wouldn't have brought Bogdanovich, but she saw. I can't keep pausing. It's going to be nonstop, people, so I might as well just talk through it. Like I said, there's any number of people she could have brought with her, or she could have met him in public like she did that other time at the restaurant. I think the fact that she told her mother how sad he was and he was crying, I think that really got to Dorothy. And I don't think he did that to take advantage of her. I think he meant that. I think he saw his... Well, I shouldn't speculate. I don't know if Paul ever loved Dorothy. Or did he love her, or did he just use her? Obviously, he lusted after her. She's a gorgeous woman. But was she an acquisition, or did he truly love her? We'll never know. But it's clear that he did see his life fading away with the loss of Dorothy. And I think the tears were real. But how much did that affect Dorothy? Okay, guys. Well, I'm sure there'll be some comments on this one. I hope there are. And I hope they're comments that are constructive that we can all learn from and speculate on. So again, Ron here. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. If you do subscribe, please hit the little bell icon next to the subscription button, and you'll be notified when I post. And that's it. Please give the channel likes. I work hard to give you guys information. As you see, these long videos without any notes, just because I'm really studying my subjects, and I want to give you as much information that I can, and then hopefully we can all engage in a nice dialogue. So give the channel likes, I'd really appreciate it, and I will see you guys at the next location. Ron saying sayonara, good night, hope everyone's well, bye-bye.